The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everybody and welcome to this BCI webinar with Scott Gould. My name is David West. I'm the BCI Head of Communities. Really like to thank you for giving up your time to join us today for this. Scott was one of our keynote speakers at BCI World back in 2018 and was such a hit that we decided we would ask him to come back and share some more of his thoughts with the community via this webinar. And he's going to do that in a few moments. Just before we do get going, just a quick housekeeping note about questions. Scott would like to be as engaging as possible with this webinar. So if you do have any questions for him, on your control panel, you will see a questions tab. If you type questions into there, what we will do at the appropriate point is we'll field those to Scott and he'll answer as many of those as he can. So you don't need to wait to the end to type the questions in. If you think of it halfway through, just pop it in. We won't necessarily deal with it right away, but we will come to it when we get to the appropriate point. So without any further ado, I will hand over to Scott.
Well, thank you very much, David, and greetings, everyone. It's great to be with you today. I want to talk about remote engagement. And when I think of that, I like to think of this film, The Martian. I'm sure you will have seen it, where Matt Damon is remotely working. And he actually really gets into his job. He really gets into this idea of being a remote worker. And that's really what we want to be talking about today, is how do we get people to be as engaged in their remote work as he was while he was on Mars? This is in stark contrast, of course, to the state of many bedrooms and desks around the world right now. And this is actually an idea that Aristotle noticed 2,000 years ago, is this idea that pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. There's something about a person that's enjoying their work, who enjoys their work, that really, really gets stuck into it. And if we're thinking about people being remotely engaged, we're actually kind of looking at this idea here. We're looking at how do we take people from being involved in labor work, where they have to be extrinsically motivated, where the idea is they've got to go to work. And instead, how do we shift them over to this idea of love work, where they're intrinsically motivated, and they say, I get to go to work because that's what we want. When people are at home, working from home, we want to know that they are going to be involved in their work, engrossed in their work, and so forth. And actually, it kind of goes to show that there's a wonderful correlation that the more of a person you engage, right, not just their body, but their head and their heart, the more value you create for your organization, right? This isn't anything particularly new, but also we realize there are benefits. And this time of remote engagement actually has a chance to create more value in our organizations, believe it or not. Now, this process, as I'm sure many of you will be aware, this is the process of engagement. This is what I spoke about at BCI World 2018, which was a great honor. As David's mentioned, I was on the stage. And I was talking about how do we engage people, because that's what we have to do here to get somebody to go from labor work, where they're extrinsically motivated, to this place of love work, where they are intrinsically motivated. We need to engage them. We need to go through the process of engagement. And there are loads and loads of benefits to this, right? Absolutely loads. This increases revenue, it builds brand values, it decreases risks, it makes you more resilient, that's for sure. But the main thing that we're looking at today is that when people are engaged, they're going to be like Matt Damon. Grant you, maybe they won't be as charming as him, but they're going to be like Matt Damon in terms of their approach to work. They're going to be remote. They're going to be, well, obviously not on a different planet, but as they're working from home, they'll be taking initiative. They will be invested in their work rather than skiving off, having a nap whenever they get the chance. Well, the question, I suppose, then is, well, how do we go about doing this? And this is where I define engagement as the process of making the most of a relationship. That's what engagement is. Engagement is saying, I'm in a relationship with you. You're the employer. I'm the employee, but I want to make the most of that relationship. Or the employer might say to the employee, I want to make the most of my relationship with you. And there are three types of engagement at work. Again, if you heard me at BCI World, I spoke about this. The first is head engagement, right? This is when somebody understands, and it's to do with job roles, communication, vision, values, and goals. Right now, I'm endeavoring to create head engagement with you, right? I'm trying to help you understand a concept and transfer a concept from my understanding to your understanding. So that's what's going on right now, is head engagement. And this is a really, really important part of work, right? We think about people seeing advertisements, that's head engagement. We think about people involved in a conversation, that's head engagement. But particularly in the work context, this is about, do I understand my job role? Is there good communication? Do I know what the vision and values of the organization is, etc.? Second type of engagement is not cognitive. It's not to do with the mind. It's to do with the body. It's to do with behavior. And I call this hands engagement. Head and hands, of course, both begin with H. So whenever you've got alliteration, you really know that something must be true. But the idea here is that hands engagement is about doing. It's the behaviors. It's the behavioral part of work. Quite literally, it's about our work activity, the meetings that we're involved in, the social interactions we have, the experience we have of being at work. And you might have come across the concept of employee experience, or EX. That's what this is about. It's about, what is someone's physical experience? What are the sensations that are aroused in a person when they are at work? Are they good or are they bad? And the concept of flow and things like this fit into here. But there is a final portion of engagement, and this is what I call heart engagement, of course, having 3 H's here. It's also known as psychological engagement or emotional engagement. It's the idea of, what is someone's sense of being? What is really the essence of their relationship with you? And this touches, in the work context, things such as fulfillment, benefits, responsibilities, their development, their growth. This isn't to do with their day-to-day experience of work necessarily in the way that hands engagement is, nor is it necessarily about their understanding of what they need to do at work, although that's very important. But no, this is the part of their connection to the workplace that really drives this sense of affection, a sense of fulfillment, which speaks less to cognition, speaks less to bodily experience, and really does speak far more to these deeper emotions and this idea of affection. So I want to quickly poll you. I want to quickly test you, see how well you've got hold of this. So here's a picture, gentleman and a van. What type of engagement do you think this is? Do you think this is head engagement, hands engagement, or heart engagement? And I'm going to whack up a poll for you. So quickly, for the van driving by, do you think that was head engagement, hands engagement, or heart engagement? Votes are coming in. So was that to do with the head engagement, cognition, hands engagement, which is to do with the body, or heart engagement? Well, and the results are, most people have said hands engagement. Interesting. I would go so far as to say that actually was to do with head engagement, right? And this is to do with cognition. Does my mind understand this or not? Let's look at another one then. Let's keep on testing this idea. This is me at a Coldplay concert. I'm there physically, and I'm certainly jiving away to the music. Is this an example of head engagement, hands engagement, or heart engagement? So let's get this up. I'm at the gig of Coldplay. Is this head engagement? Is this hands engagement, or is this heart engagement? And we've got here, wow, lots of answers for heart engagement, very few for head engagement, and none for hands engagement. Interesting again, and this shows maybe I'm not doing the best job of explaining this, because this really is about hands engagement, is I'm there in the body, right? This is about my physical experience. Certainly I have a strong emotional reaction, but this isn't about being, this is about doing, being in a place at a certain moment in time. All right, let's try again. Here we have somebody who is a fan of Nike Air Jordans, which is a popular basketball trainer, a very iconic basketball trainer. And they love it so much that they've decided to tattoo the shoe known as Air Jordan 1s onto their foot. Now, this is a physical expression, but what's really going on here? Is this evidence of head engagement, hands engagement, or heart engagement? So With the tattoo of the Air Jordans, is this head engagement, hands engagement, or heart engagement? Results are coming in. We'll just wait for a couple more. And yeah, there we have it. This time, I think we are far more aligned. This is certainly an example of heart engagement, right? Somebody has a deep emotional connection with something, and they've decided to demonstrate this through their body. So it's a little bit confusing, but this really is a demonstration of how engaged they are in their heart. All right, so let's turn this to the work environment then. You're in a meeting. Is this about understanding? Is this head engagement? Is this about doing? Is this hands engagement? Or is this about being? Is this heart engagement? You know, what's going on here? What type of engagement is this? Would we say somebody's engaged in understanding or engaged in doing something with their body, or engaged in their heart? So let's, not that one, excuse me. So meetings at work, do we think they're to do with head engagement, hands engagement, or heart engagement? The results are coming in, and I will close it there. And well, again, you can see there is this mix, isn't there? Head engagement, but hands engagement there does seem to be the winner, and that is certainly accurate. This is about being in a particular place at a particular time, right? If somebody wasn't engaged in this, then we would really notice it because their physical body would give away the signs of them not being engaged. This very much is about physical engagement in the workplace. All right, what about this then? This is a Volkswagen employee, and I believe it's a he. He really loves Volkswagen. He's very proud to work at Volkswagen. Is this to do with head engagement, hands engagement, or heart engagement? Let's go. So Volkswagen employee with a tattoo of Volkswagen on his back. Is this head engagement or hand engagement? Wow, the results are coming in quickly this time. I'll stop the results there. And it's a landslide this time for heart engagement. And that is absolutely correct. Yeah, this is an example of somebody very much being engaged so deeply in their heart that then, of course, they've gone and they've displayed it on their body. All right, final one. Here we have somebody, and they are on Gmail at work. So they're reading emails, company policies, an update, whatever it might be. Is this head engagement, hands engagement, or heart engagement? So here we go. Emails at work, communication at work. Is this head engagement, hands engagement, or heart engagement? We got the votes in. They're coming in quick again. I'm going to stop them there. And yes, that's right. We've got head engagement and a little bit of heart engagement. Well, that very much is about head engagement. This is about doing things which are to do with understanding and cognition at work. So there we have the three types of engagement: head, hands, and heart. That's going to really form the backbone of what we're going to look at in this session, in this webinar today. And so let's dive in and let's talk about head engagement, right? Head engagement. How do we get people to understand? Well, if people are remote working, they really do need to understand. That's very, very important. How do we ensure they understand? Well, three very quick things, right? We need to use clear and consistent communication. And it is actually the case that when it comes to engaging the mind, creativity and cleverness and even compassion do take second place to clarity. Cognition is all about understanding something clearly. And there's something else here that you can't over communicate. We'll look at both of these things. Head engagement also will be more successful if we piggyback on symbols and words that people already know, right? Rather than trying to teach somebody a new language, use the language they already know. And finally, we do need to tell people what action we want them to do and give them examples. That's all very well me reading this, but let's look at this and get a good grasp of this. Well, the first thing we talked about is this idea of clarity, right? And there are two dimensions of communication. I talked about clarity and consistency. Let's look at clarity. It's this great phrase by a marketing author, Donald Miller. And I think marketers actually seem to really get this idea of head engagement because, of course, everything in marketing is about, do people understand? And he says the best product doesn't always win. The product that's the fastest to understand us. This is really, really true. I was on a family holiday a couple of years ago, and I saw this sign, and it's great. Which way is Mario's? Right? Is it the same place, same direction as fish and chips, or is it the same direction as the terrace? It's hard to actually tell. And when we communicate like this, and we need to explain it because it's not clear immediately, we reduce the chance of people actually really taking attention and taking any action. And the reason for this is when we have to try and spend time understanding something, we have to use the part of our brain that's called the prefrontal cortex, this part here at the front. And that takes a lot of energy, right? It's why studying is hard work and why paying attention can be hard work. So the more that you have to use your prefrontal cortex, the more tiring it is. We had a recent example of this. I'm not trying to be political, but the recent example is that on the left, the previous coronavirus guidelines they didn't require any clarity. Stay at home. Well, I know what it is to stay at home. Protect the NHS. Well, I get the idea that if I stay at home, I protect the NHS, and that will save lives. If you contrast this, though, to stay alert. So stay at home, what does that mean? It means stay at home. Stay alert, what does that mean, though? What does alert mean? Well, it means different things. Now we're using the prefrontal cortex, and that requires people to spend energy trying to translate what stay alert means. Same thing here with control the virus. Well, how does that control the virus by staying alert? It's not quite clear to me. This is abstract. And so what we have here is an example of how using the prefrontal cortex does drain resources and makes it harder. So you need to be very, very clear immediately. However, both of these, whatever criticism somebody might lay of the one on the right, both of them do a very good job of using simple language. Compare that to this mission statement from one company: to create a shopping experience that pleases our workers, a workplace that creates opportunities and a great working environment for our associates, and a business that achieves financial success. Lots of words here. Many of these words, not those typical short Anglo-Saxon words, right? And I doubt that many people are able to quote this off the top of their head, whereas the genius of these is they're very easy to remember and quote. This isn't. Another example of clear communication, of course, would be that we've all had the guidance of wash your hands as long as it takes to sing happy birthday or jingle bells, right? This would be an example of using not just common language, but common ideas. Admittedly, there is a spelling mistake, sing happy birthday, which you could see there. But the point here is that everybody knows the song Happy Birthday or Jingle Bells. That's easier than telling me wash my hands for 20 seconds. Because it's actually quite fun to sing that song. So we talk about clarity, but we have this other dimension of consistency. I want to draw your attention to a book that I hope you've heard of. If not, I certainly would recommend you read, called Leading Change by John Cotto. It's highly regarded to be one of the best books on change ever written. And in this, he provides this formula. You can read it yourself. I won't read it to you, but he deduces that we under-communicate change by a factor of 100 times. That's what he's getting at. People often fear that they are perhaps under-communicating change a little bit, but he says the problem isn't under-communicating change a little bit. The problem is that people massively under-communicate change. So if we want people to understand something, we have to be consistent in our communication. Now, again, something that our government and many governments have actually done a very good job of is here I am checking out the status of my state pension on the Gov website. But consistently, no matter whenever I go to the government website, here I am getting advice on the coronavirus. And I'm sure many of us have experienced the same thing. You're listening to the radio, up pops an advert. You're browsing on Twitter, up comes an advert. You're on LinkedIn, on Instagram, up comes an advert, right? It's very, very consistent. And this is really important because consistency is what makes clarity of communication really work. There's no use in being consistent with an unclear message or being inconsistent with a very clear message. Rather have a little bit less consistency and a little bit less clarity, but do both of them mediocre, and you will have far better communication share. So how do you roll this out in your organization, right? Well, something that I coach my clients through is having a tiered level of communication, right? And you can read this while I'm talking it through, but the idea would be that tier one is that level of communication that you save for very, very important things, the main plot of your story. And that should be communicated formally every week, but also it should be ambiently communicated. What I mean is at a workplace, you should have posters about it. It should be mentioned on the work intranet on a regular basis. It should be a part of regular conversation, right? It's something that you're regularly talking about. And then we've got all these other forms of communication. What this means is the main thing doesn't get lost. Trouble is, many organizations, they don't have these tiers of communication. Really, all they have is an emergency tier of communication where all of a sudden something is talked about non-stop for a massive burst of, a period of time. And then they've got everyday communication. So it's the difference between having a very clear set of tiers of communication, and people know what they're looking at, versus a Jackson Pollock view of communication. Now, don't get me wrong. I love a good Jackson Pollock, but it's not exactly the most effective way of rolling out organizational communication. So that's head engagement. Let's jump to hands engagement, right? How do we go from engaging somebody's head to engaging their body, their physical activity? Well, there are some very important things here. Certainly, we need to focus on good meetings. We're going to look at good meetings in a second. We look at water cooler channels, right? This is a key thing, is how do we recreate conversations that are informal and spontaneous? And then finally, we're also going to look at putting in place a buddy system for helping each other out, which mimics the looking over the shoulder method of sharing knowledge and fosters advocacy for your continuity program. Right, there's a few different things there, but let's just get into some practical examples here. Patrick Lencioni, again, a highly recommended book that I'd put forward to you called Death by Meeting, says meetings are the linchpin of everything. He says, if I had an hour to investigate a company, I wouldn't look at the balance sheet, I'd watch their executive team. And in this book, he lays out a format for 4 different types of meetings. Well, not getting caught up into all of that, I think the main point I want to draw out here is that he says that meetings should be a place where the board are on the edge of their seats, right? And this is the idea of at work, we want work to be a place of sensation. On the left, we have a woman who's working on a project and she's in this state of flow and immersion. And that's joined by the neurotransmitter adrenaline, right? Her body will be high and excited. On the right-hand side, though, we have something that's equally important at work, is a meeting that is sensational. People are really engrossed and invigorated by it, but it's also social. And this drives other really important factors, such as social identity and participation. Is we need to have meetings that elicit the same sensation of somebody working on a project, but also have these social elements happening, right? Meetings should be a place of excitement and not boredom. Well, how do we do this remotely? Well, we do it remotely like we would do in real life, right? You can hear it in my voice now. I'm getting animated. I'm not just using a monotonous voice. But there are other little tricks that we can use. On the left, we have somebody, a group of people in a Zoom call. At the bottom, you've got a goat. Because there is now a service called GoToMeeting, right? You've got GoToMeeting, you've now got GoToMeeting. And look at the smiling on these people's faces, right? Is that actually creates a little kick of adrenaline that makes that meeting a little bit more meaningful. Or you've got people doing things like Hat Wednesdays, rocking up to video conference calls with hats on. Or you've even got people, employing interesting backgrounds. All of this creates some sense of spontaneity at work, and that is really, really important, is we have to work and put effort into making our meetings sensational and to making them also have a sense of spontaneity. Another topic of spontaneity, I think water cooler channels are really important too. This is me. I was at an online conference where you could go into the networking room and you would be randomly matched to somebody for 2.5 minutes and you would chat to them. And this is me speaking to a lady called Christina who very kindly let me take a screenshot. And this is a great example, right, of just how do we create these moments where we can spontaneously connect to other people the same way that we would around the water cooler. Well, again, how do we do that? Well, imagine that you're having a Zoom call, right? Zoom has become, very much the tool of choice. And if you're having a Zoom call with just one person, that's one more connection, right, that's being built there. That's one connection that's being strengthened. So rather than having a Zoom call with one person, why don't you bring along somebody else? Now you've got a triad, right? And now you're strengthening 3 connections rather than just one connection. So strengthening 3 more connections for the benefit of just one more person being in there. Well, that's scaling. It doesn't take much to imagine. Of course, we can scale this out. So here's something. What if in a Zoom call you talk about your continuity program, you talk about how you would apply it, But rather than just talking and coaching one person in it, you coach two people and you make a simple request. I'm going to spend half an hour talking to the two of you. I would like the two of you to share this on with another two people in one meeting. It's not two people in two separate meetings. It's two people in one meeting. Because what this is doing is this is creating that social bond that we looked at earlier, right? This is creating a sense of identity and participation. Really, really important. Well, finally, let's talk about heart engagement, right? How do we go down and engage that emotional and psychological part of a person? Well, there's a few key things here. We need to provide a psychological safety net. We need to give people the tools and the authority to lead change, right? We need to inspire and give hope. But I think one of the main things that we need to look at here is that heart engagement is where you prepare people for more change, even when you don't know what the change is and the change keeps on changing. I mean, this is the situation that we are in right now. A great example of somebody doing all of these in one go is Arne Sorensen, who's the CEO of Marriott. Now, Arne recently actually came out of chemotherapy treatment, which is why he's bold there. And he mentions it in the video. But in this short 5-minute, 49-second video, he talks about their response to COVID-19. And look at some of the language that he uses, right? This is the key thing to notice. The common crisis across our company. COVID-19 is nothing like we've seen before. Here are the facts, running 75% below normal levels. We've been forced to take proactive steps. I will not be taking a salary. I've never had a more difficult moment than this, but I'm determined. Together we can and we will overcome this. We will thrive once again. This is a superb example of somebody creating psychological safety. What does psychological safety do? Psychological safety is the ability to focus on something that is like a mist, a specter of fear, that's undefined uncertainty, in which somebody feels very much alone and in it alone. And even though it's still a cloud that hangs over you, they're able to turn that cloud turn that mist into a cloud. It's now defined uncertainty. Things are uncertain, but I've got a sense of definition around what that uncertainty is. We've taken a mist or a fog, we've turned it into a cloud. And this is a very, very simple thing to do, but it makes people feel incredibly more able and alert, right? Think about it. We can't drive very quickly through fog, but even if you've got loads of massive heavy clouds above you, you can drive through quite fine. What's the difference? The difference is a touch of distance, right, and perspective. When you're in it, it's hard to drive through it, but when you're able to get outside of it and look at it objectively, then you are able to drive. That's what it is to define uncertainty. I'm sure many people will be aware of the idea of Johari's window with known unknowns and unknown unknowns. Well, this is the act of taking something and making it a known unknown. Right? We don't know what's going to happen, but we do know some of the parameters around what we don't know. Right? A great, just very simple example of this is Wayne Gretzky. He famously said, "I skate where the puck is going to be, not where it has been." This is a really, really good example of somebody clearly saying there is an unknown, but that unknown, where the puck is going to be, it's an unknown, but I'm able to define it. I'm able to flesh it out in some way. And what that does is that reduces the psychological worry, and it creates psychological safety. So let's recap. We've talked about labor work. We've talked about love work. And this is the process of engagement, right? This is how we go about building it. And we've talked about, well, we need to engage the head. That requires us to seek a level of understanding. We've then also talked about doing, right? How do we ensure that we can do, and that we can that people know what they're doing, and that there is a sense of sensation, and that we are getting a hit on the right receptors and neurochemicals at work. And then finally, we've got this state of being, right? How are we ensuring that people have meaningful benefits, psychological safety at work? Doing that, right, is how we ensure that we transition someone from I've got to go to work to I get to work, right? I get to do this. Now, that's part one. I've got more things I want to look at in a second. But what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to just switch the main slide and pause and check in on the chat here. At this point, if you have questions and things like that, would you please take a moment to drop them in? So please take a second and think about it. What things are there that you need more clarity on that we've looked at? What areas are there that you feel the need to discuss more? What are your particular needs? What pains do you have right now? Drop them in. I'll take a moment to answer the questions before I go into the second part where we look at some of this stuff in more detail. So I'm keeping an eye on the chat here. And I trust at the moment people are typing away. And I'm not seeing any questions coming in just yet.
There's a question there now, Scott, from Niall.
Okay. Forgive me, I don't seem to be able to see it, David. Oh, right. Sorry. Forgive me, everyone. Yeah. Are there any additional guides similar to communication tiers slide T0 to T4? Yeah, certainly. Right. So let's dive into. Oh, sorry, this things just got a little bit funny on my dashboard here. Right. Let's dive into that. So I'm going to pull up for you. Give me 1 second, if you wouldn't mind. Excuse me, all. Won't be a moment. And all right, let's go. Great. So your question there was, what do we have anything else like those tiers? So let's look through what a healthy communication rhythm looks like. The first is to ensure that you have a weekly team email, right? I might be telling you to suck eggs here, but you would be amazed at how many people do not have a weekly team email. And this is very important because it really is the team where people encounter their lived experience of work happens, right? It's in the team. So we're talking here about head engagement, but it's this weekly team email that really is the centerpiece. That's where I'm working. That's what we're focusing on. But then we also want to supplement that with monthly all staff emails, right? And at the moment, those probably should be a little bit more weekly. And that's ensuring that people really have got a big picture view of what we're doing and what is our progress. If we go to the communications scorecard that I normally give clients, what I normally find is that people are inconsistent in these areas here, in one area or another, right? So we want to be looking at, is there regular communication about vision and values? Do employees receive daily exhortation and encouragement from leaders? Do team members get a weekly update from team leaders? Is there division-wide, unit-wide communication at least twice a month? And is there at least a monthly organization-wide communication? And very often people will score low on this one here. This is the place of ambient communication, as I've said, that informal place where things will be discussed and reiterated again and again and again. And particularly now that we have people working remotely, this is really, really important, is our leaders taking time to email individuals one-to-one and things like this. That is absolutely critical. Then we can also look at and drive a little bit deeper down into the quality of the communication. All right. So that communication will be more successful if people, when they communicate, emphasize a sense of belonging and shared identity, right? This is one of the most powerful things that engages people, is knowing that we are all in this together. That should be mirrored in your email communication. You should be using words like Arne Sorensen does, using the words we, us, ours over and over. Another thing, as we've also discussed, is that important emails have a subject or sender that makes them stand out, right? This is the tier thing. How do you ensure that emails that are mission critical stand out? And that really is about writing just good subject lines, and subject lines that start with the verb read this, right? Phrases like that make it very clear that something is important. Here's another factor, though, is we also want to ensure that emails contain things that are unique, inspiring, encouraging, that make people want to read them. There's a sense of intrigue or mystery about a particular email. People like story, right? So we need to have in there things that are like these unexpected moments in the story. When people are reading emails from your chief exec, for instance, are they keen to find out what it's going to say? That should be in there. And then, as we've also referred to, let's say with that, small example of the 2 different coronavirus slogans, is it clear what people need to do after reading the email? This again is something that people regularly miss, is they do not provide clear action. You need to ensure that you provide clear action that people can take and do, right? Very, very clear. And then finally, every time you communicate, are you reiterating the broader organizational vision, values, and journey? So that again is this concept of the tier 1 place. So if I jump back to the tiers, excuse me 1 second. So here, right, is that this ambient communication of the main plot then comes into our everyday conversation, right? So if we're to use a mounting analogy, if you're climbing a mountain, these things are always in front of you. They are constantly informing whatever happens when you're on the ground. On the ground is your tier 4 communication, right? This is the support this is the stuff like what support is going on, what opportunities are there. This should be on demand and easy to find, right? But it's all the stuff that supports you. It's not the stuff that you're working towards. It's the stuff that helps you work. But very often people make the mistake of emphasizing all the tier 4 stuff, the stuff that supports you, and they don't emphasize the stuff that you're actually working towards, right? Well, that really is a mistake. We need to ensure that people are very clear. That's where we're going towards. What's the vision? What's the values, right? And then all this other stuff is just supportive. Your internal campaigns, your internal projects, the different things where people can get help, surveys that are going on, the home working channels and stuff. That's all supportive stuff. That should not be the main thing. In fact, let me pull up something from that I talk about in a different presentation, but I think would be quite useful to you. This is really, again, where we see these tiers of communication come in. Tier 1 is about vision. Vision is the purpose. If we imagine a game of football, vision is why you're playing the game. And every organization is playing a game, right? It is playing a sport. Now, if you're a top 5 team, your vision is to win, right? That's your vision. Or to finish in the top 5 to ensure you get a Champions League position, let's say. But if you're a team that's at the bottom of the table, your vision is different. The vision of your game isn't to win the league. The vision of your game is to not get relegated, right? And if you're a mid-table team again, your vision isn't to win, nor is it to avoid being relegated. Your vision is something around the realms of we want to improve our position so that we can begin challenging and being someone who might get into the bottom of the top 5. So everybody has a different vision for why they're playing. That's the thing that needs to be communicated really, really clearly and constantly, is what are we working towards achieving, right? We looked at the example from that company that had that very bland and hard to understand statement, right? That's not a vision. Whereas stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives is a very clear vision. We know what we are doing, right? The vision here is really, really clear and worked out. But then we also need to break the vision down into goals, right? Goals are, this is what it's like to get the ball in the back of the net, right? It's no fun playing a game where you don't know what a goal is. Right? I remember being a kid and just kicking the ball around. It's no fun. You want to have a goal. And the goals, to come back to this, are what tier 2 is about, right? This is about what are our goals as a team etc. Excuse me, skipping back to this one. It's then values that actually really create the boundaries within which you play. And we've not talked about values today. That's not really what we're looking at. But values very much create, set for you the boundaries. And that's the stuff that, again, would also go in tiers 1 and 2. But also it's the stuff that forms a lot of tier 4. Values are the support things. They're the things that raise you up and make you able to work. They're the how of you. They're the how you work part. And the how we work is a tier 4 conversation. I think that's a fair amount on that, Niall, but I'd be welcome to talk about that more. Are there any other questions? I've intended to leave a kind of good amount of time to discuss and go over your particular needs. So I'm looking out for that now. I've also got my head in the chat and the questions panel. I'm not seeing anything come up at the moment. David, do you see anything that I don't happen to see?
No, nothing at the moment.
Well, I'll take that either as a good sign that people have had a full meal and they've got lots to think about, or it could be, on the contrary, a sign of they don't even know what questions they should be asking. I'm hoping it's the former. David, perhaps you have anything that you might suggest that would be a topic of conversation? I've just sped through some of this quite quickly with my elevated pitch of voice here, and it might be that there are some areas that you've seen that we could go back and have a closer look at.
Yeah, there are certainly quite a few interesting points. I guess what I would be interested in is around, and this might be something we need input from people on, around how much they see communication as being a key skill for business continuity professionals. I think as a profession, we've always been very process driven in the past, that, you know, we have a business continuity life cycle, and the narrative is often that if organizations make sure they go around that life cycle, everything will be okay. And we often don't talk about what some people call those soft skills, of which communication is one of them. I don't know if you've noticed anything mixing with business continuity professionals, either at BCI World or generally, whether you feel there's any peculiarities around how business continuity people communicate.
That's a very good point. Let me
one for the moment, because there is a question in from Kush now.
Who decides renew business etiquettes and ethics in the new normal? So who decides? So if I understand that correctly, we have this new normal, and who gets to pick how we actually operate in that time. Would that be correct, David, do you think?
Yes, that's how I read that.
You know, in the new normal, no one necessarily knows what that looks like. I'll again draw your attention to this, idea of, Gretzky. Hang on, excuse me. Who, very clearly says, I'm going to where the puck is going to be and not where it has been, and we're not sure where the puck is going to be yet. Now, there's this interesting stat that 95% of people are imitators and only 5% of people are initiators. The idea being that most people will generally be reactive, not proactive. And this is part of the concern with people working remotely, is the fear is, will they just be reactive rather than proactive? And we've talked a lot about how we can do things that encourage people to be, proactive, and we've talked about the different elements that need to be there in terms of engaging them. But the point there with the new normal is many people will just react to the 5% who actually begin setting what the new normal is. And I take the view here, and this would be contrary, and this certainly might not be within many people's business etiquette and things like this, but I would take the view, and I would generally advise my clients, is to create drafts of what they think the new normal should look at, put a draft into place, and then say to the managers who they report to, look, this is the draft that I'm operating according to. Feel free if you have suggestions to change it. Feel free if you have things that you want to suggest. It's an Aunt Sally, it's a straw man, it's here for being adjusted. But while we're still working it out, I'm going to put that draft into place. And many managers actually really, really like that. And many team members really, really like that. Often the issue that we get is we get analysis paralysis, right? We think too deeply about things, and we're trying to make it all perfect before we act, particularly as continuity professionals. Continuity professionals generally are people that are very big on the head engagement part, as in it is about understanding. They spend a lot of time thinking and planning and running through scenarios over and over in their head, right? And so then the issue is, right, how do we how do we use that good head knowledge to put down something that is a draft, and we can say, look, it can be adjusted, it can be tweaked. And then to your point, David, I think that is then part of the good skill of communication, is to be able to communicate as a continuity professional, right? These are the main things that I'd like you to do, but look, right now, some of this stuff is going to have to be a draft. Some of this stuff is just going to be guidance. But here are the main things that are critical, right? Here's the tier one, the critical stuff that you definitely need to do. And then these are the other things that if you get a chance to get to them. And I think that language is just realistic. It might not be thoroughly by the book because you want people to do everything, but I would rather go on people do the stuff that they definitely need to do rather than they have a list that's too long and they do none of it, right? Does that make sense, David, or is that out of line? Am I being a little bit too contrary there?
No, that's helpful. Thank you.
Now we've got a few more questions I'm jumping in on. We've got from Niall again here. Given how workforces are distributed due to social distancing, remote working, and then specific channels means techniques you would recommend. So if I talked about this again, is, in fact, let me get up. Sorry, here we go. Right. I trust you can all see this. I'll zoom in a bit more. This is a meeting structure, right? So this is very quickly, Niall, I hope that this replies in terms of specific channels. I would ensure that every day, number one, people have a check-in, right? They have a time, and you could read the text there that goes alongside it, but that every day you have a check-in of team members. Secondly, I would strongly suggest that everyone has a social channel on their chat conversation, on their chat tool, right? That place for water cooler conversations. So, these might be, that might be Slack, it might be your Microsoft Teams, but you have a place for water cooler conversation. And when you do that, you do this, right? Is you scale it. You're always looking to involve more people in the conversation, right? Then I would, as I've said, encourage spontaneity, right? Encourage spontaneous social moments, particularly leaders taking the initiative to call team members. That would be really, really important. Then you've got your tactical weekly meeting. Those should still continue. You then have ad hoc meetings as you've needed. Those should still continue. But both of these, you just need to try and create that sensation that we talked about in them. And then we have one-to-ones with team members. Again, this is more of a leadership topic, but this actually has been shown to be one of the most effective ways of increasing engagement in an organization. Is every week a manager has a one-to-one with each of their team members. And finally, we have these bigger level types of meetings, strategic meetings, which should be once a month, offsites and all hands meetings. I'll skip those. But that really is what I would see as being your important thing, is every day you have a daily huddle on your software that you're using, Zoom or Skype or Microsoft Teams. You have a social channel, and you're very strict with having good tactical weekly meetings. Right, I'm looking on here at the other questions. We have one from Monique here, who says, engagement and communication in an extended common crisis is very different to an immediate localized crisis. Communication and engagement is tailing off, and we're seeing everyone suffering fatigue, where line between work and personal world is blurred. How do we socially engage people to replace the water cooler chat, summer parties, drink nights, etc.? If I may, our toolkit is somewhat limited, although there is a little bit of ease, of course, as the government measures have come in today. But I would really see that one of this is that the realm of these spontaneous social calls is, how do you create spontaneity in a day? Yesterday, I was working with a team of senior executives, and we talked about how could they create spontaneity throughout a day. And one of the things they came up with was this idea, and again, this isn't particularly groundbreaking, but is this idea of challenges. So I think one company, large yogurt company, known for yogurts, they have made May the month of exercise, and they're just challenging people to try and do a physical exercise that's a little bit beyond where they're at. And every day people get texted randomly different challenges, right? So there we've got the randomness, the spontaneity that's happening at work. That's a very, very key thing as we discuss this idea of spontaneity. It's unexpected, and that really engages us. We've also then got, as I said, this idea of these challenges is there is this strange thing about the current world that we're in that actually enables us to use the fact that people are at home to an advantage. So, for instance, you starting a book club is actually something that that people would be far more able to engage with, because generally people are having more time to read. But in addition to that, it's also this thing of I would be up for doing a remote call on a book club, because there is this kind of at home time, and it's enabling me to do something that actually enriches my life in general. So now I'm creating excitement. I'm using my workplace to help people have a richer life outside of work. And that really is the major trick there. So I think that would supply some answers there. But Monique, you are very welcome. We still have 25 minutes, so you are very welcome to feedback with any further questions to get further points of clarity on that. There's another question here from Luke, and forgive me if I get your last name wrong, Luke, but it looks like it's Skibetchi, who says, hi Scott, in relation to COVID-19, most organizations have already settled on communications plans. Are there any risks around changing plans midway through the response? And what are your thoughts on how changes to communications could be implemented mid-response? It's a really good question. And I would again come back to this idea of Wayne Gretzky saying, I'm skating to where the puck is going to be. In fact, let's get that lovely image up again, because it is such a helpful analogy. Is you can say, right, we were skating to where the puck was going to be, and it now appears to us that where the puck was going to be has changed. So we need to change our direction to that too. And so now we're going to be putting in place a new approach, and that might change too, but it's the best that we've got right now. Now, a couple of things that are going on in a statement and in a mindset like that. The first is recognizing that in crisis, and in fact, this isn't just in crisis, this is generally in an organization's maturity anyway, everything is a draft. What I mean is nothing is ever finished. So even if we take the world's, most popular example for marketing and leadership and everything, which would be Apple, is Apple, they're never finished with a product range. It's always morphing and changing and adapting. What worked yesterday just might not be fit for today, but it might be. We don't know, right? It keeps on morphing. So I think part of your narrative has to be, this is a journey. And in this journey, we are navigating and we are responding as we go. I really like the language. Let me pull this up again, of Arne Sorensen, who's saying, look, it's a common crisis and we're taking proactive steps. If there's any good news, I can tell you that. Together we can. Is in this address, he doesn't actually give a lot of practical tangibles, but he does instill a high degree of confidence because he just speaks so clearly and he speaks consistently. And so with communication, admitting that this is going to need to change and this is what we're going to do can be done as long as your communication is clear and it is consistent. It's when your communication isn't clear and isn't consistent that then it's hard to change it because you don't have a regular pattern that people are now expecting it. So again, I would really strongly emphasize that it's clarity and consistency of communication that wins the day in these situations. The content of that content of that communication can change, and by consistency, I clarify, I don't mean in a consistent message. The message might change. I mean consistency of how regularly you are communicating. Another question here is: people do not know much about nitty-gritty of pandemic. How should management proliferate for company efforts in common business pursuit? So I'm trying to quite just understand that. I'll read it again. People do not know much about nitty-gritty of pandemic. Okay, so I think what you're suggesting is that there are details around the pandemic that can be hard to understand. How should management proliferate details? I would assume is the missing word perhaps there, for company efforts in common business pursuit. I think that actually links to the question we just had from Luke, which is the story is evolving, the journey is evolving. To think that the journey is not going to evolve, to think that you can plan your communication strategy, you can plan your continuity strategy and set it and expect it to just run and need no tweakings. Of course, all of us would agree that that is, short-sighted and naive. But then if people are expecting that, then we need to be willing to update and communicate and to say, look, it was going to be this, now it's changed to this, we've had more details, this is now the new guidance, and you just keep on updating. The key thing is that if you are sending out regular updates, right, if people get used to every Monday there's an email from senior management, every Monday every Tuesday there's an email from the continuity team, and these are clear communications, right, simple language, it's with clear actions, then I don't see a problem in being able to pivot with that. People are very, very understanding. People are very understanding. They're very supportive. Like we say, many people will imitate the tone and the pace which you set. They just need to be communicated to clearly. I think it's telling. If one watches any governmental briefings, I mean, particularly I tend to watch the ones from the UK and the States, particularly if we look at the States and we move away from the closeness of those who might be in the UK, which, we're from the UK today. If we think about the States, there's some guidance. People are frustrated in general about the guidance, but then you see the questions that reporters ask. You see the questions that the media are asking. Is their questions are just seeking clarity. So often that's what we want, is we're okay with the new guidance. We just need it to be clear. It's when there's a lack of clarity that people begin to freeze and get frustrated. And I think that's what we've seen, just over the last few days, with the government, is people felt it hasn't been clear enough. And so now what we found is the government has made things clearer, right? That's exactly how things, should go. There are no more questions at the moment. I would love to hear from further people if there are any more areas that are more nitty-gritty and need advice in. What I will ensure I do is I will provide all attendees not just the pertinent slides from this session, but also the templates that I've referred to and the different checklists that I've used, as well as others that you will be able to go through and use to ensure that you've got those good, clear rhythms for communication and for your meetings. David, we've still got 15 minutes, so we've covered a fair amount of ground. Is there anything that you think that would be helpful to touch on?
I can't think of anything at the moment. I think you've given a really good full session there with an awful lot to take in and reflect on. So there's nothing that's in my mind at the moment. I think really just a last shout out to anybody. If there is anything you want Scott to cover in this last 15, either in more detail or we've not mentioned, then say so now. Otherwise, I think we can give people 15 minutes of their day back.
I would, I think I would summarize. Some of the questions that people have asked certainly are deeper than some of the things I've looked at in the presentation, and that's often the case with how these things go. And I'm not certainly I'm a perfectionist, so I would have loved to have been able to have pre-considered those issues and talked about them in advance. But I'm also aware that actually this simple idea here of engaging head, hands, and heart, and providing clear and consistent communication and adjusting it as you need to, that you have meetings that are sensational, social, and spontaneous, that people have a sense of the senses being engaged throughout the day, and that finally, you're just thinking about how you provide meaningful benefits to people and a psychological safety net for people. That really, if you focus on those simple things and you do them well, that really does address the issue of engagement, right? Certainly it addresses 80-90% of it. And so some of these issues that people are asking for clarity on here, certainly those are particular issues. But I wouldn't want to forget that actually, if we can fulfill these simple basic ideas that I've got up here on the screen, then that actually goes the majority of the distance. And you would assume that these things would be obvious and common sense. But sadly, what happens is all of us do this, is we just get confused, right? Which is why I've tried to provide a very simple idea here of head, hands, and heart. How are we engaging people's heads? Are things clear and consistent? How are we engaging people's hands? Are meetings sensational and social? And finally, how are we engaging the heart, right? Are we providing people with a sense of meaning?
We have got one last quick question, if that's okay, Scott. If you're okay with this.
I've just seen that come up from Kush, which says, yeah, during these uncertain times, should management invest in technology enablement or people welfare? Certainly, I've recommended to all my clients that part of your psychological safety net is you say to your teams, if you can, right? So this shouldn't be a lie, but you say to your teams, if you need more support at this time, here's who you should talk to. You will find that most people won't need to take up that offer. But knowing that it's there gives people an immense amount of safety. So that's important. In terms of technology enablement, I'm someone who leans more towards low tech for engagement rather than high tech. There are a lot of technology, quote unquote, solutions for engagement. I take a more psychological approach to engagement. I certainly, I think, investing in technology is always useful, but I wouldn't see it as being a prerequisite for ensuring engagement. And then there's another conversation that's come in. When people return to work, how do we address the tendency to speak personally at the water cooler and maintain social distancing? Oh, that's a very good question, John, because we've talked about here about the importance of the water cooler. And I should say the benefit of the water cooler provides two things for us. It provides spontaneous chance encounters that weave a thicker net of connections at work, right? That's what it does, is you meet different people, you talk about different things, and all of this is unscheduled, unplanned, it's random. Sometimes it's useless, sometimes it's useful, but all of it is building a stronger bond, right? That's really important. And then the other thing the water cooler does is it gives you a chance to reflect on things, right? It gives people a chance to have a little moan if they want to, have a little bit of a gossip, reflect, chew things over. All of this helps processing because we learn by what we say more than what we hear, right? So this gives us a chance to externally and verbally process stuff. Well, your issue here that you've raised is, well, what happens then when the water cooler isn't allowed through social distancing? And of course, you can't just say, well, look, let's go outside and things like this. And of course, you could have this sense of standing at different ends of the kitchen. But the idea I think you're getting at here is that people are going to be less open to those water cooler conversations because just our behavior is going to be adjusting. We're going to be staying alert, right, to use the government's phrase. This is where I would, and certainly bearing in mind that many people will not be coming back to work immediately as well. This is where I would be encouraging these spontaneous water cooler, digital water cooler conversations, right? Where you have channels that are devoted to spontaneous conversation. For instance, a company that I was talking to yesterday, something that they do is they have a channel where people just share things throughout their day, right? Photos of their food and, here's my child disturbing me at work, and, this is the video, this is the film I watched this evening. But all of this is just creating that kind of conversational flow. I think perhaps the difference I would make is that I would use technology for that was close to hand. So rather than just being Slack, which can be perhaps difficult to get to, or Microsoft Teams, how about using WhatsApp for some groups, right? How about having text circles? How about making it even more personal? And I think what we'll find is that those groups, let's say you've got half a dozen people in them, maybe a dozen, what we'll find is those groups actually will be in use way after this crisis is over, because they become these new forms of intimacy. And that's really, really quite a beautiful thing. All right, I haven't seen more questions come up. Certainly happy to discuss them and take them.
No, I think we may have hit the end there, Scott.
So, well, then to recap, I'll ensure that lots of assets are provided to everyone, lots of practical tools that they can go away and use. And otherwise, it's been a delight to engage with you and the BCI community today. And thank you very much to David for allowing me to work with yourselves on this.
Yep. Thank you, Scott. It's been as good as I remembered it from 2018. So thank you so much for giving up your time to help people there. To delegates, if you do want to watch the recording of this, your original registration link will take you to the recording. Usually it takes about an hour for it to render to go on there, but any time after that, you can use the link to watch the recording again if you need that. As Scott says, we'll be in touch with you with the materials. Thank you for your time and for learning, and I wish you well with your work. Thank you, everybody.